I'm Theron to Ramacharaka. No, wait. I do need more light. And there's more light. See, first came the word. I think I need more light. Sound, vibration. And then came the light. And you know what? I can see that it's good. But first there had been light, and then it went off. And then came the word, then there was light. And I saw that it was good. It kind of goes in a cycle. Okay, that all put aside. We now have our correct lighting. I want to point out a reasoning error that is very common, and it's very simple to understand. And I'm sure that we all know what it is. And still, many of us get fooled by it. When it comes to controversial topics that are often talked about right here on YouTube. Let me give you an example of this reasoning error. A somewhat ridiculous example, yet rather well grounded because it has to do with things that we already know about. Let's say my neighbor and I live far away from anybody else. Nobody ever visits us. So nobody can actually see what it is that we're making our claim about. Our claim is that, in this ridiculous example, while nobody else in the world has ever cut their grass, just accept that as a starting point. Nobody on earth ever cuts grass. Nobody ever heard of such a thing as cutting grass. Of all things, cutting grass. But my neighbor and I, we devised a mechanism that we call a weed whacker. It has a little motor on it and a long stem and these strings that stick out at the bottom where there's a rotating wheel attached to the motor, and this rotating wheel spins at high velocity, and with these strings sticking out, those strings cut grass. And we've been doing this now for a while. We've been cutting our grass. Not just cutting our grass, but which is unheard of around the planet, except for among my neighbor and I. Not only that, we've been doing it with this thing we call a weed whacker. And we actually have gone into our houses and made some YouTube videos explaining that we cut our grass with weed whackers. Now, we don't haul out our computers. We don't actually, let's say our computers are bolted down. We can't take them out there. We can't take our little video cameras out there, and we don't have any other cameras. So we can't actually show what it is we're talking about. So we have a controversial topic going around the planet. We got some people scratching their heads saying, well, there's two guys saying the same thing. So I think that they cut their grass. I think that they actually cut their grass. And I think they're doing it with this thing called a weed whacker. I mean, why should I disbelieve them? They seem to be rather rational when they talk. One of them claims that he drives long distances to go to work, and he's a police officer, so he's a reputable member of the community, and I don't think they're just making this stuff up. I think that they cut their grass with weed whackers. Then you have other people saying, come on, who cuts their grass? And weed whacker? What's that? Weed whacker. Come on, these guys are making this stuff up. They're neighbors. They're in cahoots. Jeez. You guys are falling for a line of crap. Oh my goodness, weed whackers. Cutting grass. Who does that? Oh, a controversial topic. It gets hashed around a while. A lot of videos are made about it. But then somebody invents a lawnmower. And they come up with this idea that we're going to get a film crew out here. We're gonna have a documentary made. We're going to cut our grass. We're gonna actually show grass being cut in this documentary. We got a film crew. Yeah, baby. We're gonna provide some intersubjectively confirmable empirical evidence of grass actually being cut. Yeah, the outlandish idea. Grass actually being cut with a lawnmower. Empirically verifiable. That means you can see it with your physical senses. You can verify it with your physical sense apparatus, your eyeballs. And it's intersubjectively confirmable. That means more than one person can see it at a time and agree upon it. Like, yep, I saw them cut their grass with a lawnmower. Hot dog. And somebody else can say, I saw it too. I saw the same thing. Therefore, it's true. It's true. They cut their grass with a lawnmower. And the documentary showing this evidence of grass cutting with a lawnmower is called, the film is called Weed Whacker Theory Debunked. And the narration in the video says, these guys who've been saying they cut their grass with a weed whacker, they've been making this stuff up, folks. Because this is how grass gets cut right here. Lawnmower. Yeah. Those other guys have been hoaxsters, and it's debunked. They've been deceiving you. What suckers you've been to buy into this idea of weed whacking. See, I told you it wasn't true. Now we see how it's actually done. It's a lawnmower. Either those other two guys don't cut their grass at all, or they're using a lawnmower. Alright. That's my ridiculous example. Now, we don't need to go into the name of the fallacious reasoning or what category of bad reasoning it is, or the logical technicalities of why it turns out to be fallacious reasoning, because it's rather simple, and how the reasoning works. You know, the result of it, and the form that it appears in, its basic form, should be apparent and easily recognizable by you. Due to the absurdity of the example I just gave, involving something that we already know about. Weed whackers. Okay. So, now, how does this carry over into some other affairs about which, even though we can pretty easily understand the error in the reasoning involved here now that I've stated it in rather entertaining form, we often can still get fooled and fall into step with this reasoning and the conclusions reached when it is about controversial subjects, controversial topics about which we may have interest or not, controversial, and is proposed to us in larger contexts of related material that involves better reasoning in large. But here, in one little segment of this larger context, we're throwing this bit of faulty reasoning about something. And throughout that whole context, there's been an at least apparently logical progression of thought with good rhetorical tools used in the presentation of the material, and it's all rather convincing, and the narrator, has a firm, confident, deep voice or whatever. All of these things that can be tools of persuasion and use of, in general, good logical progressions of thought. But here at one point, we're thrown this bit of faulty reasoning about something, and we just kind of like buy into it without recognizing that it's this same fallacious, erroneous conclusion making going on at that point. It happens. It can happen to the best of us. It can. For example, extraterrestrials, UFOs, the very idea that we have visitors or passers-by or whatever they might be, but they're coming from other galaxies. You know, the Orion Belt, Pleiades, wherever. They're coming these long distances. Interstellar travel. We've got people going, you know, I believe it. I believe it. We're not alone. We're not alone. I mean, the probability, just consider the probability of life in other planets, life in other galaxies, life throughout the universe. I believe it. I believe it. I mean, we have some evidence of the results of such travel. Why, we have cave paintings, we have all sorts of things that might fit into what we might call evidence of such interstellar travel. I believe it. But then you got other people, they say, come on. Aliens from other galaxies? You gotta be joking. My goodness. You believe anything, wouldn't you? You probably believe in astrology, too. For goodness sakes. I just heard something outside. Like on my porch. Could be an alien visitor. Like my neighbor. That guy who uses a weed whacker. Well, it's okay because I use one too. He doesn't scare me. Yeah, I'm not buying into it. I mean, space travel. That distance, that's not even possible. I mean, the hazards alone are enormous. No craft could survive the trip. That's just one thing. I'm not buying it. No. So we have a controversial issue with complications. All right. Somebody else gets another idea. These UFOs, you see, they are multi-dimensional beings. They're inhabited, they're flown, they're piloted by multi-dimensional beings. They're not from someplace, they're not from a land far, far away. They're from right around here, within like the Moon-Earth system, but they're multi-dimensional. They're not human. They're not human. And they're not traveling great spaces. What they're doing is kind of like traveling between dimensions or planes of manifest cosmos. They're actually inhabitants of, well, maybe, you know, like another bandwidth of, you know, conscious substance frequency than we are. But they're multidimensional. They can manifest physically at will. So we see them manifesting when we see these spaceships, these UFOs, kind of like just suddenly appearing. Well, that's them coming in from another dimension right there. Right here, where we are. And then they make this crop circle and then they're gone. They didn't zoom off to some other galaxy. They just kind of like went back to their own dimension. But right here. So they're local. And they're not human. And their primary, plane of habitation isn't the physical one. All right. So you got people going, you know what? I believe it. That's what it is. But then you have the other group of people, another group of people saying, multidimensional beings. Now you're really going to extremes. Where did you come up with that? You'd probably believe anything. But then, wait. Another group of people, they say, I think that they're not human, and they're not from other galaxies, and they're not multidimensional. They live here, the physical Earth. They live among us. They walk among us, but they hide. They are critters, and they're really smart, and they're technologically advanced, and they know how to make these crop circles, and they they're in UFOs. They make crop circle, and they're from here. They live in caves. They live in tunnels underground, and maybe they live. Maybe they hide underwater. Maybe they live in holes in the earth that are under the oceans. So they don't breathe water, but they live down under. That's how they hide. Their craft actually go underwater. So they're unidentified, submarine objects. USOs, kind of like thing. And then they fly, so then they're UFOs at the same time, and they zip around, and so you see, they're not from somewhere far, far away. They're not from some other dimension. They're from right here, and they're not human. And, for goodness sakes, they're the ones who make these crop circles going on. And we'll get to that later. The crop circle bit. But then somebody finds some leaked footage regarding one of the, missions to the moon. And what's seen, now we have some empirical evidence. All right? We have some empirical evidence. Anybody can look at the footage. Anybody can see it. Flying machines have been seen on the moon, and one of the Apollo missions got footage of them. And it was hidden away for quite a while, but it got leaked out. Flying machines, ancient flying machines, decommissioned, crashed even. Decommissioned. I mean, these things date back thousands of years. And it looks like these things were space travel worthy. These flying machines. And there they are. There they are. They're on the moon. So, somebody posts this on YouTube. And in the video it stated, undeniable evidence that aliens do not come from other galaxies. Undeniable evidence that aliens do not come from other galaxies. You see, they're right here within our Earth-Moon system. Undeniable evidence. They're from the moon. Okay. So now we have people saying all those other ideas about UFOs were wrong. The intergalactic travel, the multidimensional travel, the critters living under the water travel, thing about UFOs was wrong. It was false. Suckers. They're from the moon. Now, does the moon footage prove anything about intergalactic travel? One way or the other? No. Does it prove anything about multidimensional beings? No. Does it prove anything about critters, non-human entities, traveling around in UFOs, living right here on Earth? No. For that matter, does it prove anything about UFOs belonging to the Air Force? No. It doesn't say anything about any of those things one way or the other. What does it prove? What does it show? That some kind of flying craft were found on the moon. That's what it shows. Back to crop circles. Some groups of people say aliens. Aliens? Extraterrestrials. Aliens from other galaxies. They're coming here in UFOs and they're making these crop circles. We've seen it happen. We've seen footage of UFOs doing it, for goodness sakes. But we know that, the UFO thing in itself is controversial and perhaps debunked. So, but we still think that extraterrestrials, involved in intergalactic travel from other galaxies, make these crop circles. We think so. But then the group of people over here saying, crop circles, you know what? We really need to stick to scientific explanations here, folks, And mainstream science isn't saying anything about crop circles. The voice of science has not spoken up about it. With anything, firm and solid. Solid and firm. Science has not spoken, so crop circles aren't even real. Alright? Then you get another group of people who say that, crop circles, they're real enough. Yeah, they are real enough, but here's how it's done. And here's the proof. Here's the proof of how it's done. A couple of guys with planks and ropes made a documentary. There's a documentary made. You can see it. You can find it on YouTube. It shows these guys, they contrived a way to make crop circles, alright? They just attach a couple of ropes to some planks. They hold the ropes in their hands, and then they step on the planks. And then, there's footage. There's documentary. They made a documentary about it. You can see them doing it. It's intersubjectively confirmable empirical evidence that crop circles are made by a couple of guys with ropes and planks. They went out at night. They showed how it's done. It's simple. It's easy. You just have to have some knowledge of some basic geometry and math and some creativity and a little bit of extra time on your hands to go sneaking out at night and doing this clandestinely. But they showed how it's done, and therefore crop circles are made by guys with planks and ropes, and that's that. Done. Alright. Does that show or say anything about other explanations for crop circles? No. Does it debunk anything? No. What does it show? That crop circles of a rather simple nature in comparison to some of the other crop circles of a rather rudimentary nature and exhibiting certain characteristics that may differ from the characteristics exhibited by other crop circles, but nonetheless it shows that some crop circles have been made, at least the ones in the documentary, have been made by guys with planks, and ropes. That's all that it shows. It doesn't debunk anything. It just adds another method of making crop circles to our list of possible ways of making crop circles. That's all that it does. Now, I know a guy. I do know a guy who many people take to be a very logical reasoner. He works in a very popular establishment. Many people enter, stay at, and then leave the establishment every day. And it's almost unanimous that this guy I know, it's almost a unanimous conclusion that this guy is very intelligent and thinks very clearly. And I mentioned crop circles to him once. I just mentioned it. And he said, oh, those, yeah, those are made by guys with planks. Yeah, it was shown that that's what's going on. So I haven't heard anything about crop circles since then because I haven't looked any further into it. It was guys with planks, right? He bought into it. He bought into the conclusion that crop circles are exclusively made by guys with ropes and planks because a couple of guys with ropes and planks went and did it. So regardless, you see, regardless of how plain this reasoning error is, once you hear it in an absurd example like the weed whacker versus lawnmower example, hypothetical case that I stated here at the outset, regardless of how simple it is to see the error in the reasoning, that debunks the whole idea that my neighbor and I have been cutting our grass with weed whackers. Regardless of how easy it is to see the fault in the reasoning, people fall into step with that error when it occurs over controversial subjects in larger contexts and is presented with the affirmation that this now debunks other explanations. That's why I'm posting this, because it's easy to fall into step with this faulty reasoning. And folks, if you're watching YouTube videos or reading information, looking up anything, that has to do with any of these controversial issues, and you actually probably are trying to learn something, so be careful about thinking errors just like this, simple ones being thrown at us in very convincing form, mixed in with other information that might follow a good reasoning and be supported by good evidence, and then right in the middle of it, you get thrown this kind of poor reasoning, stating conclusions, and you walk off for the rest of your life, might walk off for the rest of your life, believing the faulty conclusion, the erroneous conclusion due to poor reasoning being thrown at it. So be careful of it. Look out for it. Here's another example. Let's say the topic now is human communication. Let's say one person says something to somebody else, and the thing they say in words, they use in language that's not very clear at all. And the subject matter is rather obscure. But the other person understood exactly what they meant. How does that happen? Well, somebody might propose, well, there's a form of thought transference taking place, and it's taking place in the form of mental images. Mental images, or let's call them primary thought forms, are being transferred from one mind to another. And there's will force involved in doing that, and an intention for the other person to understand what's being said, and so there's a transference of mental imagery taking place. And somebody says, huh? I don't get it. Explain that further. So we go into this whole explanation of what thought forms are and mental images and how they're formed and a discussion of the nature of mind and the nature of consciousness. You just got to talk about thought vibrations. You have to talk, the word telepathy comes up, and, you build this whole picture of how this is happening, and somebody says, okay, I think I get it, but I don't know. I'll look further. I'll look further into it. And well, they look further into it. And they run into another explanation. They run into another explanation. They run into the idea that that other stuff, that's just going too far. That's too complicated. That's my goodness, all the things you have to swallow in order to just get at what's going on with some talk between one person and another. Now the other person understands what the first person said. That's just ridiculous, all of that. Don't tell me you believe all that stuff, What's going on is just a conveyance of ideas. That's all. And then maybe they have some kind of, actual, description of what it is they mean by that. And so now some people say, well, that's what it is, The general idea got conveyed and the person got it right. That's what's going on. I mean, how many times does a general idea get conveyed but not the specific meaning? And then there's non-accurate communication too. Let's not forget inaccurate communication here. For goodness sakes, let's use our heads. Let's apply some common sense. And then you get somebody else who comes along and says, folks, we have to stick with science here, okay? You people are claiming to be applying common sense here. Let's use some scientific method, okay? Let's get down to science. After all, we have to have some reliance on science. Science reliance. So, look, let's think scientifically about this. What it is, what's going on, is body language. That's all it is. It's body language. Now let me give a demonstration. Now I'm really good at reading body language, so I'm going to show you how this works. And they get somebody to say something to them using rather obscure terms about some remote topic, all right? And the body language expert gets the right idea, and it gets confirmed. Maybe the speaker, the person speaking to them, the utterer of this vague language over an obscure topic, wrote down exactly what they meant beforehand, and it was kept a secret. So they make their utterance, and the guy who interprets body language really well gets it right. And then they open up the piece of paper that the person wrote down their real meaning about on it. It's read aloud, and it's exactly what the body language expert took out of the whole thing. All the other theories have now been debunked, right? It's all body language. It's all body language, right? And the body language expert breaks it down, on video, in a documentary that's shown on TV, in mainstream media. Well, then it's got to be true. It's got to be believable. Every part of it has to be believable. Every part, including the conclusions drawn from it, right? Breaks down the whole body language thing. Well, you see, when Mr. Utterer over here moved his eyes this way, I took this meaning out of it, and his foot wiggled a little bit, and I got this meaning out of it. So you see, it's body language. That's what it is. That's how I did it. Therefore, all other explanations are now debunked. Science wins again. Body language. Does the body language explanation and demonstration say anything about the other explanations? No. It doesn't. It doesn't say anything about them one way or the other. What it shows is that body language is at least a factor in some effective communication. Does it even indicate that there's only one explanation for the phenomena? No. It doesn't even do that. Does it say that all of these proposed ideas about, explanations for the phenomena of effective communication are factors? No, it doesn't say that either. All it says is that body language plays a role in effective communication. Or in communication, just communication. And that in the case shown in the demonstration was a case probably of body language playing a role. That's all that it says. So, folks, please watch out for this, because it is easy to fall into step with the erroneous conclusions drawn with respect to debunking everything else. Just watch out for it. If you're trying to learn something and you run into this kind of talk, just consider the reasoning involved. Is it of this erroneous type? Regardless of how easy it is to understand this kind of faulty reasoning, you can get fooled by it because of the context it occurs in, your biases coming into it, and other factors. And there we have it. Be well.